From the Marquee Media Studio inside Mark Tank, it's the Mark Haney Show.
Yes, this is the Mark Haney Show on a mission to ignite the entrepreneurial revolution right here in the hometown we love. And we do that by creating a competitive advantage. We call it the backyard advantage, the most connected community in the world for local entrepreneurs. And it's based around this culture of love, right? Helping one another. And I think every one of us that wants to be successful in life, it helps if we have an advantage, right? If we've created our own little cheat code, our own little system. Well, today, I think you all know I like to share the stories of winning, and most of the time it's startups or venture capital or entrepreneurs. And today we have somebody who has had enormous success in the world of baseball. Today we have Steve Sax. He is, I'm going to undersell this a little bit, but I think he was NL Rookie of the Year, 5-time All-Star, a couple of World Series rings with the Dodgers, and obviously such a career. And you're a Sacramento guy, so we are so lucky to have you and your story today on the show, and we're lucky to have you here in Sacramento.
Thanks, Mark. It's great to be here, and I love being from Sacramento. I love where I grew up. I grew up on a farm in West Sacramento, and I have a great family, and that's how I'd sell it. That's what I'm about. I mean, I love how I grew up, and it's kind of a nice thing because you see all the people that play in other sports, that be it basketball or what have you, and they don't know much about Sacramento. But isn't it funny? A strange coincidence that so many times the people that come here from different parts of the country, they wind up staying here. They really love Sacramento. They grow to love it as I have since I was a little kid.
Yeah, you came back here because you love it, but you guys have a really close family. Your brother Dave was also a professional baseball player, but even the extended family is extremely tight. Yeah. How influential, maybe describe that and how those influences shaped your pathway to success.
It's everything. We grew up in a very traditional Catholic tight family. We grew up on a farm in West Sacramento. We didn't have any money, but we had a close-knit family. We had a lot of personal responsibility and self-reliance. And, there's times where we had to struggle, but we had a tight-knit family. And, staying in line wasn't really an issue for us because my dad was a tough dude, and you didn't want to cross him. My dad's gone, and I'm still afraid of him. So you didn't want to cross him, but he was a great dad, and you learn a lot the way you grow up, and I've always held true to those values my whole life.
What about your mother? What kind of influence did she have? Was she the opposite of your dad?
My mom was the greatest mom to ever live. My mom was a very traditional Italian woman who loved her family. It was everything to her. My mom was the best cook in the world. She could heal up a scratch or a hurt arm better than anybody. My mom was very loving, and she was the greatest. She was the greatest mom, and she was very wise. And my dad really leaned on my mom a lot because he knew how wise she was. And so I had very fortunate upbringing to have a strong, disciplined German father and a very loving traditional mother. So we had the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Well, you think about big dreams. A lot of us as little kids want to be professional athletes or do something really big. And then society, if we don't make it for some reason, maybe athletic ability or something else, a lot of times those dreams, they kind of go away and we end up sort of settling. And so part of what I love about hearing stories like yours and just success stories in general, it makes the rest of us rethink settling. Maybe I shouldn't settle. If Steve Sax seems like an ordinary guy can do it, maybe I should rethink my dream as well. So when did you sort of begin those dreams, and when did you know that those are probably going to become a reality if you just kept it rolling?
Dreams started when I was about 5 years old.
Okay.
Wanted to be a baseball player. I had all my eggs in one basket. And when I talk to people about their dreams and goals, I think you got to really listen to your heart. Your heart really matters a lot. I threw all my eggs into that one basket, which is not the conventional thing to do. And I didn't go to college. I took a risk. And there's a lot of things you got to weigh. Without risk, there's no reward, as you well know, being a great businessman that you are. And it's also good to, spread the risk, so going to college kind of does that. But I had to roll the dice, and I wanted to get into an organization early. I was fortunate to be drafted, so I forewent the opportunity to go to college and took the risk and signed professionally and went for it. And fortunately for me, it worked out. And so I think that's the important thing when people talk about, what should I do the prudent thing and just look forward and just be safe, or should I listen to my heart and go for it? Well, I kind of went for it, and it worked out for me.
Well, some of us might be late developers, so we end up developing into something at age 20, 22, 24. Obviously, you were drafted as an 17, 18-year-old.
18. Mm-hmm.
Were you... So I wouldn't consider you as much of a late bloomer as what some are, but when people, let's say you're talking to a 8th grader or somebody that's a freshman in high school and they're battling just to make starting position or just to make a team, what would you say to that person, knowing that there's so much more development ahead of them?
Yeah, oh, exactly. There is. And, they live in a vacuum, of course, because they've only been on the earth, 14, 15 years, and that's all they see. But, the element of failure and bouncing off that wall of failure is absolutely critical to being successful. I mean, I'm sure you've had failures. I had so many failures. I'm never afraid to talk about failure because I think it's critically important to get to the point where you want to be ultimately successful. You got to find out where those fences are, not just thinking that it's going to be a straight line. No stock, even the great stocks that we see in the world, have a straight line to success. There's always some of this involved. There's some of those downtimes, and that's what makes you productive, and that's what makes you better.
So when you were, let's call you're 8th or 9th grade, and thinking I want to be, I don't know, what did you want to make varsity as a freshman? What were you probably had high goals and any setbacks in there that you had to regroup from? Like you thought you were better than you were at some point, maybe?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know,
I'm
just guessing.
Of course that happens. And, and since I've been retired, I never want to be one of those guys that said, I was this good. And it's like the longer you played and the further you are from the game, the better you were, right? I never want to be one of those guys. I know how tough it is to play baseball. It's extremely hard game to play. But let me give you an example. When I was 9th grade, I was 5'3", and I weighed 105 pounds. My freshman year, and I played on the freshman team, and I hit 200. I was failures everywhere.
Okay, folks, listen to that.
Failures everywhere, and I thought, oh my gosh, is this? I want to be a baseball player. I'm hitting 200. I'm already in high school. Well, that year after my freshman year, I grew 6 inches in one summer, and I just started growing and growing and growing. Well, my sophomore year, I made the varsity team. I hit 400 and made all city as a sophomore. Went from 200 as a freshman to hitting 400 on the varsity team and made all city, and I was getting scouted already. So, listen, failures are going to happen, and nothing's going to go in a straight line of success. So you got to hang in there, and you got to just have some toughness, some intestinal fortitude to say, hey, I'm going to get there, but there's going to be some times where it's going to be a struggle. And there were many more struggles for me, even when I was in the big leagues, lots of struggles. And, I could, you don't have enough time to tell you how many times I struggled, lots of times. Yeah. And so, but it made it all better in the long run.
In terms of, designing your plan, how much did you do in terms of trying to create a competitive edge for yourself? I talked about that with the backyard advantage. Everything I do, I was the undersized athlete, the wannabe type of thing. But, I always did a little bit extra work to try to give myself a better chance of, getting in the game or becoming an all-star and so on, even as, a high school player. Did you have things like that where you were like, look, I'm going to create a little system for myself where I get better faster?
My brother and I was so fortunate to have a brother that was just as competitive as I was. And we were always going at it. We played with a tennis ball on the side of our house, and we had a pump house. We had our own water well out on the property we lived in. So we had a little house built around that water well, and we'd use the house as a backstop. We'd play with a tennis ball, and we'd play all day long. And so we were always sharpening ourselves. We were always getting better by competing against one another. And we would be out there all day long in the summer in Sacramento. It's a pretty hot days. And we would be out there all day long, and we'd come in the house for a drink. My mom would say, hey, what are you doing in the house? Get outside. So we'd go out, and sometimes we'd get in a fight because one's calling balls and strikes and the other doesn't agree with it. And we'd throw down the bat and we'd have a fight. And then we'd pick it up and we'd start playing again. So
I remember
we were always playing,
Okay, so obviously I must not have played enough because, I didn't make it too far in baseball, but we would always pretend we were someone else, right? If you're pitching,
we did the same thing.
Who were you?
Okay.
Like when you were up there pitching to your brother?
I was at Giants.
Oh, okay. Juan Marichal?
Yeah, Juan Marichal, Bob Bolin.
Okay.
We were Dave Haverlow. I mean, all those. And my brother was the Pirates or, one of the Reds, one of the teams. We would imitate the hitters, the way they hit. We knew the lineups up and down,
like
just
Roberto
like you.
Clemente.
Yeah. One of my favorite players, Roberto Clemente. And we would just, imitate those guys. We'd bite right and left-handed. And we didn't know that we were actually, some people call it work. It wasn't work to us. This was fun, Mark. We were having a great time. And so in my sophomore year, and as I kept growing, my baseball kept growing too, and I was happy with the way things were going. And I just didn't grow that one summer. I kept growing till I was past my senior year. So and it really helped me because then I was able to compete on a stage with some of these guys that were coming out of, USC, and I was coming out of a little tiny school in West Sac, and
younger too.
Yes,
right. You went to Marshall High School, River City,
right? And I'm 18, and I'm going against guys that graduated from Arizona State and Stanford and
4 years old, 4 or 5 years older.
Right, exactly. And so I think that was an advantage for me, though. Although it was tougher, I had an advantage because I was in the system sooner and learning the way they play.
You went from, varsity pitching back in those days, I'm throwing 75, 80 miles an hour is throwing pretty hard. 80 miles an hour, 80 plus is pretty hard.
Yeah.
When you're at USC, you're 90.
Oh, yeah.
You're
at
seeing
least.
a different level of pitching. So then you get into the pros and it's 90 plus all day long.
And everybody's that good.
Yeah.
You're like the best guy in your area. Well, when you go even to rookie ball, and I was in Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada, that's where I first went. Everybody was. I was drafted as a shortstop, and I'm watching our fifth round pick of that season, Mike Marshall, take batting practice, and I'm watching this guy hit, and I'm saying, I've never seen balls hit that far. He was hitting balls to right center field that were going up when they were in the lights, and I'm thinking, this is sick. The kind of power. This must be what they talk about, big league power, because I'd never seen that around where we grew up. Not like that. And so everybody was like that. And it's an eye-opener. It's like, whoa, I get it now. I get it.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe walk me through that career. So you started off in Alberta.
Yeah.
And as an 18-year-old, how soon did you get called up?
It took me a little over 3 years.
Okay.
3 years and 2 months. I got called up. But the thing is, I had a kind of a bit of a untraditional way to get to the big leagues so I never played college. Okay. I got drafted out of high school, and then I played rookie ball, 2 years of A ball, and then I got called up from AA during the season. So I never played college. I never played AAA, and I never even finished AA. And I got called up during the season of AA. So I missed a lot of maturation time. Did
somebody get hurt and it was you? And
yes.
You were ready?
Yeah. And when I was in San Antonio, I was having a great year. I was hitting 340, over 340, and I won the most valuable player in the year of the season. I made the All-Star team and blah blah blah. So, and it was a perfect timing because during the strike of 1981, so the major league teams weren't playing. So Lasorda and Campanis and the Dodger Brass were going to see the players in the organization. They came to San Antonio, and I hit a home run to win a game, and it was just all these things were just lining up. And then the strike was over in August, and this was during like the 4th of July. So I was continuing on in August, and then 9 days after the strike was over, Davey Lopes got hurt, pulled a groin, and I got called up.
Okay.
And so, and the thing about that, Mark, when I got called up, there was a guy in AAA, Jack Perconti, who was hitting exactly the same thing I was hitting in AA, and he was 28 years old and I was 21, and they took me over him. Wow. So yeah, and he wound up having a really good career. He got called up to another team, and he had a really good career later. But they took the 21-year-old.
It reminds me of almost like the Brock Purdy story. It's like, don't get ready, be ready, because you never know when
it's a lot like
Davey
that.
Lopes is going to get hurt, and they're tracking you.
Yep. And I was a ninth round draft choice. I wasn't like one of the first guys picked, and I was 220 something picked in the country. So, it wasn't like I was on anybody's radar.
And which coach for the Dodgers? Because I'm trying to think of who was coaching was Maury Wills coaching with the Dodgers then?
He was one of the coaches.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which coach with the Dodgers organization would you say had the most impact on you?
Oh, there was,
Is it tough to narrow that?
Well, I can tell you. Well, Tommy Lasorda, let me tell you, when I went through that throwing issue, and people, I'm sure they know about that. I had a throwing issue when I was 23 years old. It was my second year in the big leagues, and I lost my confidence, and I couldn't throw the ball from here to there until I got my confidence back, and then I wound up leading the league in fielding. So it shows you how far that can happen. Mm-hmm. Talk about failure. But I would say that Chico Fernandez, my defensive coach in the minor leagues, and I had a hitting coach named what was his? His name will come to me. But I had two guys in the minor leagues that were really instrumental to help me in instructional league, which is after the minor league season's over, you go down to Arizona for another mini season. They take people down there that they feel can be in the big league soon, and they try to put them on a fast track to the big leagues. That's called instructional league. And I was down there with these guys, and they really, really helped me a lot. And when I went through tough times, Tommy Lasorda, when I was in the big leagues, he never took me out of the lineup ever. Mm-hmm. And there were times where I completely lost my confidence, and I was praying to God that I get my confidence back. And my dad was a big influence on me as far as that goes as well, because a conversation I had with my dad the night before he died changed my career, gave me my confidence back, and this throwing issue disappeared. And if you like, I'll tell you the quick one about that.
Yeah, we want to hear about that, but maybe let's describe this throwing issue. So as I remember it, you were at second base at that point, right?
Yes.
And so that's a pretty short throw.
Here to there.
And
you roll it over there.
Yeah, and you are a skilled middle infielder, which means you got to have all this kinds of hand-eye coordination. It's no big deal to throw the ball, 45 feet over to first base.
Simple.
And so then what happened? You made a wild throw, and then the thing got infectious?
Exactly. I made a relay throw to home plate, and it didn't need to throw the ball because the guy held up at third. It was against the Expos on the third day of the season, and I hummed it in there anyway, and it was a perfect throw. It was a one hop, and Sosha, he missed the ball. It kicked off his leg. It was a great throw, and the run scored, and people were booing, and from that point on, I had this issue. It got in my head, or not in my head, it got into my psyche about throwing the ball. And so I was suddenly straddled with this issue of having to I couldn't get the ball over there.
Yeah. So did you again, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, were you trying to be too careful, or just a variety of different... It was
like the golfer that gets the yips right when it comes to the point of release.
Yeah.
You're like, and you kind of freeze up.
Yep.
And so this thing was, I was a laughing stock of the
league.
You
kind of got known for that a little bit at one point.
And I won the Rookie of the Year, made the All-Star team my first year, and here it was. I was on stage and embarrassing myself, and it was horrible. It was the most lonely thing I've ever been through in my life.
What did you lose sleep? Did you?
Yes.
Okay.
Lost sleep. Said a lot of prayers, and it was kind of a two-pronged approach how I got through this. Number one, I got tired of trying to mask it. I got tired of just saying, it's just no big deal. That's how the first symptoms of this are. You try to, put it under the rug. So I just said, okay, I got an issue, and I'm going to challenge this issue, and I'm going to bite it right back in the face, and I'm going to tell everybody I have an issue, and I'm going to overcome this thing, because the last thing I'm going to do is give up my career. I've worked too hard, and I'm going to make this a personal fight, one-on-one between this issue and me, and we'll see who wins. And I beat it. And I'm one of the only guys that has ever beat this issue. There's plenty of guys that have went through it and either changed a position or lost their career. Wow. That's how powerful it is.
What did your dad say to you before he died?
My dad was like, which guy I can tell you he was like. He was kind of like a John Wayne type of guy. He didn't go around saying I love you and I'm sorry and all that stuff. He just wasn't affectionate like that. But so my dad was revered in our family as everybody loved my dad. He's the greatest guy in the world, but you want to stay on his good side. That's a very important topic. And so I had a lot of deep respect for my dad, and so the day before my dad passed away, I was talking to him on the phone. We had just getting ready to play a game. We were in Atlanta, and we were going to Cincinnati after the game. It was getaway night. And he said, listen, I want to tell you, he says, I know you're having this issue about throwing the ball. He says, but people are talking about this mental block. You don't have a mental block because you can drive a car correctly, right? And I said, yeah, you can speak correctly, yes, and you can judge a distance. I said, yeah. He says, you don't have a mental block. He said, what you have is a temporary loss of confidence. And he says, and you get over this by gaining it back in practice, because my dad was a good baseball player himself. He says, because I want you to know that I went through this same thing when I played, and you will get over this thing by getting your confidence back in practice. And that's the last thing he ever said to me. And he was right. So I started working this thing back, getting my confidence back in practice. And when I got my confidence back, the thing disappeared. He was absolutely right. It saved my career. And I asked my mom about this. I said, Mom, I talked to Dad about this issue that he had about throwing the ball, and my dad was a really good shortstop. And my mom and dad had been together since the 5th grade. So she knew my dad really well, of course. And I said, that really helped me, knowing that he went through this thing, this tough, invincible guy. If it could happen to him, well, that's why I knew I could get over it if it happened to somebody that strong. And she goes, I want you to know something. She said, your father never had a throwing problem. He only did that to put it in perspective for me.
Wow.
And that's what leadership is. That's what real leaders do, is they'll take the arrow for somebody else. And they don't complain. And they just show up and do it. That's what I remember the most about my dad.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's a tough story to top, but okay. So, in terms of helping the next one in line, I touched on this a little bit at the beginning. Preparation and routine. That's a big part of my game, or I always thought it should be. I probably was more lazy and maybe didn't have the discipline or the structure. My friends weren't out practicing like that, doing the extra stuff. So I tended to do it like on my own a little bit. Yeah. And maybe this is going to sound kind of funny. I was almost a little bit embarrassed that I had to go run extra or do extra stuff in order to, be halfway decent. I was embarrassed that I needed to create these extra routines for myself in order to have a hope of success. So for me, my advice would be, don't be embarrassed. That's the silliest thing in the world now looking back at it.
No question.
Because it's like, that's something to respect.
People will follow that.
Yeah. But then I was like, oh, it shows I'm not good enough. I need to practice more.
No.
It
also shows your humility.
Yeah.
Which is a huge, huge thing. Humility and gratitude. Not to cut you off, Mark.
No, I want to hear from you.
But I would look at somebody like that and I would say, geez, the guy's pretty humble. He's out here showing himself. He's transparent. He's working hard. He's making the case. That I'll follow a guy like that. And the other thing, when you talk about sports, which I think is a great metaphor for life, you deal with the ups and downs, the travel, the politics, just what we do in our lives, and that time where you went through was setting building blocks for you and into what you are now. And you're such revered and respected in our community. And those things that you went through, those things you were doing in sports may have helped you, and probably did. I'm sure it did put you where you are now. So isn't that a wonderful thing? God works in great ways, and sometimes you just can't question it. You just can't.
I agree.
Yeah.
Did you now today and moving forward? So a lot of the routines that you pick up along the way, they transfer to post career and so on. So, is there anything that you learned, doing this that is sort of like really is having an effect now too, in later in life, even at post baseball?
No question. It's a great question, but there's no question about that. I think the things I learned early in my life about being on time, about being punctual, about the way from when I was a kid, my dad taught me how to shake somebody's hand and to be on time and look them in the eye when you talk to them. Those type of things have always been a rudimentary, basic, good thing to start the ball rolling. And, you just build from there. So, the things I learned early in my life, I still do today. When my boy was getting, in high school, and he kept going, Dad, take me over to Safeway. I want to get this job as a bagger, and I want to get this job. And I kept taking him over. They kept saying, no, we don't have anybody. Finally, after about the 10th time, they say, okay, we'll hire John Sax. And he had that job all through his first 2 years of college, all through high school, first 2 years of college. And still, when I go over there, I see the people that worked with my son, and they say, sometimes they don't say anything. They'll look at me and they'll just tear up because we all know about my son. And he had such an impact on people. And those things that he did, he would tell me, the things I learned being a bagger at Safeway helped me so much in the military. They were just enormous helps for me going into the military. And you wonder, how could that be the connection? How could that work? Well, like I told you about the basic rudimentary things that you learn, being on time, being punctual, being respectful, doing those things. They matter in life. They matter tremendously. Even in the military, it could matter. So I think those things make a connection.
Well, let's talk about fatherhood, and I'd love to talk about John, if it's okay.
Sure.
Obviously, you knew how to raise a son, and he joined the United States Marines. He was an officer and so on. But maybe walk me through Steve Sax, the father, professional baseball player, bigger than life, and now you're a father, and maybe what it's like growing up as the child of Steve Sax, and then what kind of dad were you?
Well, I had so much fun being a dad. I'm still a dad to my daughter, Lauren, and I was just a regular guy. I mean, my son and my daughter didn't look at me any different. They didn't. Your
kids are a little bit. So Lauren, I think, is Marcus's age. She's about 35, 36.
Yeah, 36.
36. Mm-hmm. Okay, same age as my son. Okay, sorry to interrupt you. Just wanted to put that into context for our audience. You have, she's an adult, but yet. It was so when she first was born, you're still in the pros at that point.
Yeah.
Okay, so just setting the timing for myself. Okay.
They've both been in the dugout. They've both been in the locker room and all that. And but they still didn't know me as they didn't look at me as a big somebody that was like in a public eye or anything. They just knew me as dad, and so it was great. I loved it. I wouldn't have changed it for anything, and. I was just a regular guy to them. That's we were always very close, and to this day we still are. So. Yeah.
And were you your dad was John Wayne? Who were you? What were you?
I was not. There were some differences between my dad and I. My dad didn't spare the rod, and and that's one thing that I didn't want to do. I didn't want to ever hit my kids and that type of thing. And so, the funny thing about it is, Johnny, I never even had to put Johnny in his room. Oh, wow. Never gave him a timeout, never gave him a scolding, never did. I don't know how that's possible, but I never did. Lauren almost gave me 4 heart attacks, but my daughter and I are really, really close. And it's wonderful how kids can be so different, Johnny was a little more quiet and more reserved when it came to around the family, and Lauren, she's full speed ahead, but she's awesome.
And what's she doing now?
Lauren is she's got her own home-based business. She has an Arbonne business, and she loves it.
Okay.
And she's doing great. She loves it. She's doing really well. She's had it for a long time, and she is now remarried, and she has 2 other children plus her own, and they have a great blended family, and she's very, very happy for quite a while. She's been married to Leaf, and they got a great family. They're really happy.
All right, so I want to talk about Johnny, and this is going to be a little bit more difficult because I didn't know you, and but I knew of you, of course. Everybody would know you, and then I heard about what happened to your son, and somehow I reached out. And actually, one of our portfolio company founders connected us, and you and your brother came by, right there on the couch across from where we're at right now, and I brought up my son and a couple of other Marines that would have a, I guess, sympathetic ear, be better listeners than me, to try to understand what you were dealing with. And this was several months ago, but maybe walk us through what you had to go through and what you're going through.
Yeah. Well, on it's coming up on a couple years ago, on June 8th, 2022, my son lost his life in a training accident in the Marine Corps. And after June 8th, it's a different world. I have a different perspective on the world. I have a different it's hard to explain. And this is where I find myself struggling for words, because I'm a speaker and I can talk my head off, but when it comes to this, it's sometimes hard for me to explain. And when I saw the Marines at the door, I absolutely knew that there was some horrible news coming, and I knew that there was a crash of some type during the day. I found out at about 3 or 4 o'clock when I went over to Lauren's house. Her mom was in the front, and she was on the phone with the Marine Corps, and they were saying that there was an incident, but they didn't say what it was, because when that happens, they gather all the communications from anybody that's near the event, and they wait until they can come out with a statement. They don't want things to get convoluted. So I understood that. So I thought, okay, well, maybe it was a fender bender type. Maybe they had a rough landing, or maybe it wasn't Johnny's plane at all. So I waited, and then I came home, and then I went to bed about 9 o'clock. And at 9:10, there was a knock at the door, and I went in. There was 2 Marines there, and I knew what it was. And I still can't believe it. I don't understand it. I just don't understand it. And so, I'm gonna have to get some help. I know that. I know I'm gonna have to. I'm never gonna move on, because I don't want to move on. I don't want to move on. If it's, I know grief is the price you pay for loving somebody, and that's never going to change. So maybe if this is what my life is going to be, and I have to grieve forever, I'm sure that I will. And I'll move on. I mean, I'll move forward, but I'm never moving on, and I don't want to. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I brought up that day, my son Marcus, who was shot in Afghanistan. The other 2 guys were obviously could relate because they were in the Marine Corps as well. Relate meaning relate to what it was like to be in the Marines. And they've lost friends as well. But your brother being here, so you two sitting on the couch, and you guys live right by each other.
We live across
the street. Okay, so he came over right around that same time. I don't know if he was there when the knock on the door happened, but everybody was there, and your whole family is sort of rallied around you and Lauren and the immediate family.
I'm with my family every day, which is I don't know what I'd do without my family. They're the biggest support anybody could ever ask for. And my brother knew about the incident, but he didn't know to what degree, as I didn't. So he was always looking down the street, and he saw the Marine van come, and he walked outside.
Shit.
And he came down, and he saw the Marines walking up, and he knew it too. He walked, actually, when I opened the door, I saw the Marines, and my brother and his wife were right behind him. And so that's how that happened. And I don't remember what they said. I already knew.
He basically learned it the same time as you.
He learned it the same time I did. He learned it with me. And what was so unreal is my brother's son was the same age as my son. He's 4 years younger than my son. My son was born in August, and he was born in December. Just last year, we lost him too. So my brother and I have both lost our sons, and we just look at each other sometimes, and we just shake our heads. We just don't know why. But someday, I know one thing, Mark, and I talked to my second grade catechism teacher, Sister Michael, and she's a very wise lady. She's 86, and she looks like she's about 55. And she told me, and I believe this as much as I'm looking at you, is someday I will see him again. I will see him like I'm looking at you. And that gives me great solace to know that when I leave this earth, I will be with my son. And that's comforting to me. I know that.
Well, I'm sure he's looking down, proud. You moving forward, not moving on, moving forward in his memory. And you have launched a foundation to help families of, and scholarships. Can you describe that and kind of what that does? Is that therapeutic for you, that way to channel this grief?
Yeah.
It's how to channel it?
It's a great point. And it is therapeutic. And we've launched the Capt John J Sax Family Foundation. And if people want to go to that and check it out, you can go to johnnyourhero.org, johnnyourhero.org. And what the foundation's mission is to support other and future aviators that want to accomplish that dream like my son did. This is all in the vein and thread of my son's love for aviation. He wanted to do this since he was a little boy. And so we're going to help families to get them over the hump, whether it's a hardship in the family, whether it's a young man or young woman that want to go to college and become an officer like my son did, and they don't have the means. We're going to help them get there. We're going to give them the opportunity to accomplish that goal. Last year, we had an event at the Reagan Library down in Los Angeles, the inaugural event for my son, and we were able to already, just got off the ground, we gave a $10,000 grant to a family, the Travis Wilkie family in Colorado Springs. He was in the Air Force, and he died the same way my son did, in a training accident. So we gave a scholarship in his name to the Air Force Academy to help aviators in the Air Force Academy. So it feels good to do that. And that's what we're going to continue to do.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, I know we went kind of deep today, and I'm not really a small talk guy anyway, so it's it's, I think, therapeutic for all of us as parents to hear what you have gone through, and for us to count our blessings and be a part of your story in kind of in a way. But in terms of so maybe just one or two more questions, and I'll veer back toward our audience a little bit in terms of people wanting to achieve and become something great. When you go around and speak, what are the kinds of things? And I know you're in media too, so you speak all the time. You've got podcasting that you do. I think you're on the you're on the radio. You have a radio program that you do on like Sirius XM.
I did that for 9 years, and now I'm actually getting in the booth live. I do the Saturday night games and TV for the River Cats, and talking to some MLB teams right now next year to be in the booth. So that's what I'm going to do.
So you're good at talking about the game for sure, but in terms of the things that are not the nuances of the game and how to win, maybe walk us through some of those kind of things that you think are important, that that might translate over to any of us.
Yeah. Well, two things I can start out by saying is do you love what you do? That's critically important. You got to love it. They ask me all the time, what should I do? I say, what do you love? That's a good place to start. You have to do what you love doing, and then you're gonna be able to go through and supersede some of those bad times because you love it. If you don't love it, you might as well just give it up, But if you love something, if it's ingrained in you, then you're not going to quit, and that's the key: is do not quit. The second thing I will say is when somebody asks me, well, I'm using baseball maybe as a metaphor here, and they say, well, I want you to check this guy out and you can see how he plays. And I say, that's fine, but tell me what does he do in practice? How does he practice? Is he committed in practice? Does he take practice like a game? And does practice mean something to him? And that to me is another critical way, because that lends to how he's preparing, or how he or she is preparing to what he does. If you prepare correctly, you can go to bed at night and saying, you know what, the rest ain't in my hands. I can take care of two things: how I prepare and how I react to what happens. The score and all that, that's kind of in God's hands. I mean, really, it's not. I mean, the ball could hit a rock and carry them off, or you could hit 4-line drives and they catch it. I can't control that. I can control how I prepare, and I can control how I react. I can't. The rest is not in my hands, and so I'll leave it there. And if I was managing a team, I would tell them, I will take this, and based on the character of you guys or you women on this team, I will take that and roll the dice with you. But as far as the outcome and the scores, we can't control that, but we can control how we prepare and how we react, and I'll take my chances with you on that. And let's leave it there. And so the pressure's off you. Yeah. You really don't have control of it 100%. Those other things you do, but not that. So that's important.
I love that. And so one of the things, I'm kind of veering off, I was going to kind of go to the last question here, but it made me think, because I've got grandkids growing up through. I coach baseball and football, and I was one of those coaches that I didn't really go argue with the umps or the refs too much. If I needed to understand a call, of course I'm going to do that, but really trying to demonstrate a level of sportsmanship for my team, for my players and for my other coaches, that sort of put that above the score, as you mentioned. But really, it's just part of my competitive nature that, you want to be as great as you can without looking like a jerk to the people you're trying to lead.
Right.
And so now, from what I've heard, I'm not coaching anymore, but I do watch grandkids playing sports and stuff. There's a little bit more parental BS happening than probably when we were kids, for sure. Mm-hmm. Even when I coached 20 years ago. Any thoughts around the way it's changed, and maybe advice for parents and or coaches that are kind of in the heat of it right now?
I can give you a great example. I was at my grandson's game, and a guy made a horrendous call. I mean, it was so obvious. And I was behind the backstop, and everybody was giving it to the umpire, right? All the parents were giving it to him, which is, I'm not for that. And I did not say a word. And the guy turned around and he looked and he pointed at me. He says, "And you keep your trap shut." Then I came unglued. I didn't do anything, but I was like, I didn't say a word. And so, look, maybe I was a good target, whatever. I was standing right there. But the parents got to chill that out, and let the kids just go. So lots of times the parents in it's all good meaning. The intent and the good, the goodness of their heart is all there. They'll go out and get kids a hitting coach and a pitching coach when they're 8 years old and all this stuff. And sometimes they'll ask me, "Is that good?" And I'll say, I'm not for it, because you're putting pressure on the kid. If he doesn't light the world on fire, he's going to know you spent money on a coach, and then, oh my gosh, they're not going to retain all that anyway. They say, "What would you do?" And this is what I would do. Here's what I would say. I would say, take your child to practice, drop him off at practice, go home and make dinner, and go pick your kid up and bring him home, sit at the table, and then ask him or her, "Did you have what happened at practice today, and did you have a good time?" And they would tell you, And that's it. That's it. Just let them grow up and let them love the game. When they get into high school and college, you can get technical if you want, but not when they're these little sweet children. Let them just have fun and let them enjoy the game. That's what I would say. Don't put the pressure on them. They want to impress you. They want to be like you. They want to be mom and dad. So just let them have a good time and tell them how great they are. And when they grow up, maybe you get a little more serious, but not when they're little kids.
Yeah, let them love the game.
Let them love it, yeah.
I love that. Okay, so what did I not ask you? Last question. What did I not ask you that we got to make sure that we have you share?
Okay. I don't know. I think you've asked. I think you did a great job.
Okay.
You know what I like about you as a host is I try to do the same thing you're doing. Is I just let the other guy talk, and you do a great job at that.
Thank you.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you having me here today.
Well, thank you.
I can't think of anything, Mark. I think you handled it pretty good.
Wow, we are lucky to have you and lucky to have you in Sacramento, but we're lucky to have you on the show as well. So thanks,
Thank you.
Steve.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
You bet.
Thanks for watching today's show. My goal for every episode is that you find a takeaway, something tangible you can use in your business today. And if you have a comment about a favorite takeaway, feel free to put it in the box below. And if you have a topic that you'd like me to bring up on the show, don't forget to let me know. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to learn more about entrepreneurship. Because at Haney Biz, we are always by your side.